Good evening and welcome back to our study on end times, on Revelation. Tonight we are looking at chapters 16 and 17. And so if you remember from last week, we ended with essentially the introduction to the 7 plagues and 7 bowls that being introduced. And so what we're going to find tonight is those bowls actually being poured out. And if you also remember from last week, I talked about how it seems that the 7 years are done. They're up. And by 7 years, I also mean the final 3.5 years of those 7. And that is all wrapped up. And that Christ has taken back the Jerusalem. And, well, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So in any case, again, from last week, I suggested that we are maybe now in those final 30 days of Daniel chapter 12, where it's not 1,260 days, it's 1,290 days. And then there's another 45 days after that. And so that brings us to chapter 16. And when the smoke filled in the temple, it said that nobody could enter the temple. And it says in chapter 16, then I heard a loud voice from the temple telling the 7 angels, go and pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God. And so it seemed that the voice that's coming from the temple would have to be God's voice because it says nobody could enter it. So the first angel went and poured out his bowl on the earth, and harmful and painful sores came upon the people who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. The second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became like the blood of a corpse, and every living thing died that was in the sea. The third angel poured out his bowl into the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel in charge of the waters say, just are you, O Holy One, who is and who was, for you brought these judgments. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. It is what they deserve. And I heard the altar saying, yes, Lord God the Almighty, true and just are your judgments. The fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and it was allowed to scorch people with fire. They were scorched by the fierce heat, and they cursed the name of God, who had power over these plagues. They did not repent and give him glory. Maybe I'll just pause at this moment and say that often people want to equate the 7 bowls with the 7 trumpets. And they point out the similarities in the judgments of God between the trumpets and the bowls. And in answer to that, I think the most outstanding difference is that with the trumpets, it says that 1/3 of the earth, or 1/3 of the waters. And with the bowls, it seems to be that it is 100%, it's global. And then secondly, if you remember, I know it's been a month or more, when we went through the trumpets, we saw that there were 3 woes. And the first woe was trumpet number 5, the second woe was trumpet number 6, and the assumption is that trumpet number 3 is woe number 3, even though Revelation actually never mentions which or what is woe number 3. And so then that leads into the 7 bowls. And then third, the reason why I don't think the trumpets and the bowls are the same is at the end of the 7th trumpet in Revelation chapter 11, around verse 19, we see this picture of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, where we have an Ark of the Covenant. And then we get that again in last week with chapter 15 at verse 8. Once again, it talks about the sanctuary and the smoke and how nobody could enter it until the ceremony is done. And so that lining up with the time frame of after the trumpets and before the bowls. So I think those 3 reasons are pretty strong, but it's certainly not something to stake your life on. The 5th angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and his kingdom was plunged into darkness. People gnawed their tongues in anguish and cursed the God of heaven for their pain and sores. They did not repent of their deeds. And I should mention again how the sun has been having a reoccurring role in the book of Revelation. The sun goes out, the sun comes back on, the sun goes out again, then the sun gets too bright, too hot. And so it seems pretty clear that when, the sixth seal and with the trumpets and the bowls, that when something is happening with the sun, it's temporary, and then it returns to normal until the next next solar event takes place. Verse 12. The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, to prepare the way for the kings from the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs, for they are demonic, performing signs, who go abroad to the kings of the whole world, to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty. Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake, keeping his garments on, that he may not go about naked and be seen exposed. And they assembled at the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. Verse 15 is, maybe some of your Bibles it's red letters. It's Jesus talking there, and he says, blessed are you if you keep your clothes on. And, that does sound kind of funny. It's like, what in the world? Yes, I know the state of the world right now, and yeah, there's probably a fair faction that have no problem running in the streets naked. But when Scripture talks about garments, what is it a metaphor for?
Being ready. Good works.
Yeah, being ready, good works, right? And that's going to be explicitly stated for us next week in chapter 19, where it says that the okay, yeah, so the bride was clothed in fine linen, bright and pure. For the fine linen, the garments, they are the righteous deeds of the saints. And I know this has been a reoccurring theme, and I'm starting to maybe sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but your works in the book of Revelation are paramount. From chapter 2 and 3 with the 7 letters to the churches, now into next week with chapter 19, it's all about your works. And no, you're not saved by your works. I am not saying that. But if I am James, I am saying what?
You're dead without works. Faith is dead.
You're my works demonstrate my faith. I will show them my faith with my works. And so those are the clothes. And if you stop, the implication is this. If your clothes comes off, that means, with the metaphor, you no longer are doing good works. You're no longer living righteously. So if I were to go back to Matthew 24 from, again, probably about 6 weeks ago, remember, Jesus says that the love of many will grow cold. He's not talking about the wicked people. He's talking about those who claim to be Christians. And he says the love of many will grow cold. They will stop showing their love, and if we remember from 1 John, which says what? Okay, we got that one ready? We show our love for God by obeying his commands. In other words, doing works again. Okay, and then backing up a little further to verse 14, it talks about these demonic spirits coming out of the dragon and out of the beast and out of the false prophet. In order to do what? To entice the kings to come and do battle against Christ. Now, and this is a big debate, and I'm not entirely sure where I stand on this, whether the kingdom of the Antichrist will be 100% global, or if he will rule that 1/4 empire that we talked about in Daniel chapter 7. And what he needs to do here is convince the other kings to send their armies to help fight Christ. If he was truly the global leader, he would only need to give the order, hey, send your armies, we're going to battle. But instead, it says he must send out these demonic spirits that are going to perform miracles to convince the other kings to send their armies, to assist the Antichrist in fighting the true Christ. Okay, Before we get to verse 16, which seems to be the big verse of the moment, are there any questions for what comes prior? Caleb?
What is the other support for global Antichrist kingdom?
It's just when we see the passages, for example, we just read the bowls. They seem to be 100%. So if God is pouring out his wrath on the Antichrist kingdom, and he only, as it seems to indicate with the mark of the beast, which would be another evidence for global, then these bowls should not read as 100% or global. So I think there's a good case to be made for a global and Antichrist empire, and there's also a good case that can be made to say, no, actually, there's going to be 3 or 4 empires, but his is going to be by far the most powerful. And we gave that explanation again when we did Daniel chapter 7 with possibly a Russia and a China picture, etc. Amy?
Isn't there also kind of a possibility of a combination of the two? Like, based on Daniel 7, there are these 4, but that the one kind of gets dominion over the other 3. So there would be...
So
Yeah.
at the beginning of chapter 13, it talks about the beast that has, looks like a leopard, has feet like a bear, and its mouth is like a lion, right? And so I think we do see there that if there are 4 empires, this one beast has some kind of upper hand. We'll call it an upper hand over the other 3.
And then it would make sense that God's wrath would, at least in part,
Affect the others as well, yeah. Yeah, good. Michael?
I noticed in verse 16:10, it says the 5th angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and its kingdom was plunged into darkness. Almost like it was just one kingdom, not the entire earth.
Good.
And I don't know.
Good. So you can make a case with the 5th bowl then that again it's going to be multiple kingdoms, again with his being I like to use the upper hand because it shows it's more powerful but not necessarily completely sovereign. Yes?
So it kind of ties in with what he was just saying there. What if the beast is Nero?
Well, if it was Nero, we'd have to say Nero comes back to life, right? Because if we're talking about the first Nero, and if Revelation was written after AD 90, and Nero lived and died in the 60s, I mean, it would be after the fact. The most common, now there are some people who want to hold to an earlier dating for Revelation, and in that case, I suppose then that they would say Nero is currently ruling. But most scholars do hold to a very, very late date for Revelation, well after everyone's dead. Other apostles, I should say, that he's the last one. So if you hold to an early dating for Revelation, then yeah, sure, a case can be made that it would be referring to Nero. Yeah. Joey?
Verse 12 is talking about how the angel clears up the river from away the kings of the east. What does that mean?
Right, so literally it talks about drying out the Euphrates River so that the armies aren't hindered or slowed down crossing the Euphrates to get to this battle, to get to Christ. Now, whether Euphrates at this point is still blood, and the blood dries up and stinks really bad, or if for some reason Euphrates is still water and it dries up, but in any case, it's gone to allow easy passage. Good. Yeah, Joseph.
Well, looking at my vision here, it says, "Behold, I'm coming like a thief.
Yes.
Blessed is the man who stays awake." It seems like the rapture hasn't happened yet at this point. I mean, especially if we're talking.
Yeah.
About,
Okay. I see what you're saying. So, if I go back to 1 Thessalonians, where he talks about coming like a thief in the night,
right.
and then he explains, actually, if you're true believers, it won't be like a thief in the night because you're going to be aware of it coming, right? And there's that but that, Christians don't seem to realize that's in the Bible. He won't come like a thief in the night for those of us who are in the Word.
Right.
So the implication is then that this actually reminds us of the rapture, right? So those who are seeing him coming, they've been raptured, and those whose love have grown cold and where you stand on eternal security for salvation, but it would seem that these people whose love grew cold were not raptured and are still around for all this wrath, and so they are here. And he's saying, look, you guys, if you stay awake, you won't be here for this.
So that's what, there's people that are behind that profess to be Christians, perhaps. Maybe they lost their faith, and that's who the ones that actually should be keeping the garments.
So this is like those of us who are reading this passage, it's like an aside for us. Saying, hey, be faithful, stay true, right? It's the same thing as 1 Thessalonians, where Paul's saying, use these words to encourage each other, chapter 4 and chapter 5, so that we stay faithful and walk righteously, keep our garments on, and we are raptured. So we don't get caught up in the trumpets, the bowls, and ultimately the battle of Armageddon. Because otherwise you're going to be there and it's going to be very miserable. Jen?
So I know this is totally off topic, but it feels like Passover and Sukkot are re-energizing times for everyone to energize each other to go back out and share the Gospels and the whole Bible. Because we get so pumped up during those times. And it feels like we probably need to feel that way more during this time. We need to have more of those times where we stay faithful and we stay in the Word and we do good works.
Yeah. So God has those built into his calendar, and then we as individuals may have other stories in our lives that come out throughout the times of the year. You know, like with my family and our car accident and the testimony that we share with that every year and other things. So, but yeah, you're right. I think God did put those in his calendar for that reason. Amy?
I'm just going to say, in reference to what Joseph was talking about in verse 15, that's not the only time in Revelation that that Yeshua kind of pauses and is like, hey, I'm coming. You know, like, I'm telling you all this so that you're ready, because I'm coming. So even at the very end in 22, he says several times, chapter 22, behold, I'm coming soon, which chronologically he's already come in the order of Revelation,
right.
But it's like he's pausing for a moment and talking to the reader.
Yeah, good. So 22 verse 7 is one of those, and 22 verse 12.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good.
And
Good.
verse 20.
Okay. Yeah, Tim.
So starting back at the abomination of desolation,
Okay.
the Antichrist is declaring himself God.
Yes.
And at the same time, we see in 14, what we looked at last week, there's an angel going around saying, hey, there is a real God.
Right.
What does he say? Fear God and give him glory, because his hour of judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth.
Yes.
So you have the Antichrist claiming to be God, and an angel at the same time, in addition to the two witnesses saying, no, you're not. And so when we get to 17, where you have the three frog spirits, he's assembling them for a specific moment in time.
Correct.
Come to fight God.
Yeah.
I guess he would be saying, come to fight the pretender.
The false God, yeah.
The false God is coming. Because it's not just, the battle of Armageddon. It's, where does he say? They assembled them at, where is it?
So that was a great day of God.
Yeah. So
Great day
they're
of
coming
God,
for a
right.
specific time and purpose.
Yeah.
To fight God himself.
Yeah. Crazy, huh? Good. Okay, well, let's talk about that last verse, though. And they assembled them at the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. Now, first of all, I think at the beginning of our chapter 1 of Revelation, I talked about how this was written in Greek. And there is a lot of internet teachings right now that say, the Bible, all the Bible has to be written in Hebrew because it's the sacred language of God that all Scripture has to be written in. And I just cannot see any evidence for that whatsoever. Rather, you're going to write in the language that your readers can read. And Revelation was written to modern-day Turkey, far to the west, right? And they didn't speak Hebrew there. They spoke Greek and maybe some more local languages. And so what we have here by John is saying you need to understand that this place is in Hebrew called Armageddon. Now, first understand how we pronounce this in Hebrew, we have to look at the Greek. And in Greek is Harmageddon. And we don't get the H from the Greek. And I wish they would put that in there. So it's Harmageddon. Harmageddon. And so when we then take that and we go to the Hebrew, well, everyone who knows Hebrew knows what the word har means. So that part is not controversial. Har in Hebrew means mountain. Mountain. Now, as far as agreement goes, that's the end. That's when we get to the Mageddon part that it all goes a little wonky. Now, the most common view is that it is another way of saying Megiddo, the city of Megiddo. And Megiddo is not on a mountain. It's in a plain. So then we have to say something like the mountains of Megiddo that are nearby, which would be probably, say, Mount Carmel. Now, Mount Carmel is not a simple mountain like this, like Mount Tabor is in Israel. It's kind of a mountain range. So, for example, if you want to pick out where Elijah called the fire down, it's like, well, you know, it could be anywhere because it's a little mountain range.
Megiddo is on a mountain.
What's that?
I've been there. It is on.
It's on a tell, right? It's on a little bit of a raised up tell, but it's at the very edge of Jezreel Valley. I've been there too. I took a little picture of a manger and a stone. Stone manger. You guys know that the manger's made out of stone? Not all of them. I suppose there are some wood ones, but most are made out of stone. So it's on a tell, just as you're heading to the west of Jezreel Valley, you start to climb up the mountains. So, you want to put up that picture for the slide? And all right. So I know it's a little blurry. I put Jerusalem on here just so you have a little bit of context. And if you can see this shaded area here, this is the Jezreel Valley. And just as you're coming up out of the valley, here's Megiddo, and here's the top of the mountain range here. So you start to climb up. The valley's, you know, it's probably 50 or 100 feet below you, and then the mountains start to really accelerate up behind you. So that is the most common view of where Armageddon is, right there. Now, a lot of scholars are not satisfied with this explanation. It feels like it's kind of being forced. So another view that I really like is when you go from Hebrew to Greek, there is a letter in Hebrew called the ayin. It's a silent letter today. Anciently, they think it was a guttural that was deep in the throat, and it stopped being used. But they would transliterate it into Greek with a gamma. Gamma is where we get our letter G from, right? G. And so we get Armageddon. But if it is the ayin, then we would have it silent. And so there are some scholars who think it should be Har Moed. Anybody know what Moed means in Hebrew? Appointed time or meeting. So Mount of Assembly. Mount of Assembly. Now, Mount of Assembly makes a lot of sense because well, where would you assemble if you're in Israel? On a mountain. It'd be on Mount Zion, right? That's the assembly place 3 times a year. You are required to go. Now, secondly, the reason why a lot of scholars like it is because it harmonizes very well with the Old Testament prophecies of the Battle of Armageddon. Yes, take out the word Armageddon because it's not in the OT prophecies, but we do see this final battle happening at Jerusalem. Micah chapter 4, verse 11. Now, many nations are assembled against you, saying, let her be defiled, and let our eyes gaze upon Zion. But they do not know the thoughts of the Lord. They do not understand his plan, that he has gathered them as sheaves to the threshing floor. Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I will make your horn iron, and I will make your hooves bronze. You shall beat in pieces many peoples, and shall devote their gain to the Lord, their wealth to the Lord of the whole earth. So there we see the nations brought together. They think it's their idea, but God says, no, it's my idea because I'm going to destroy you. Another one is in Zechariah chapter 12. The oracle of the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Thus declares the Lord, who stretched out the heavens and founded the earth and formed the spirit of man within him. Behold, I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah on that day. I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it. On that day, declares the Lord, I will strike every horse with panic, and its rider with madness. But for the sake of the house of Judah, I will keep my eyes open when I strike every horse of the people with blindness. Then the clans of Judah shall say to themselves, the inhabitants of Jerusalem have strength through the Lord of hosts, their God. On that day, I will make the clans of Judah like a blazing pot in the midst of wood. Like a flaming pot in the midst of wood, like a double red here, a flaming torch among sheaves, and they shall devour to the right and to the left all the surrounding peoples, while Jerusalem shall again be inhabited in its place in Jerusalem. And I guess I can just stop there. So, what we see in those two passages are commonly understood by scholars to be referring to the final battle against the nations, how he gathers the nations to Jerusalem, and then he destroys them, being the Battle of Armageddon. Now, last week, at the very end of chapter 14, we saw the beginning illustration of the Battle of Armageddon, and it was given in some colorful language, but it talked about the God, standing in the wine press and crushing the people. And it says that, let me just read it. And the wine press was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the wine press as high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia. So we have blood that is, yay deep for essentially the length and breadth of the nation of Israel. So therefore, while put my map away, but while the battle may originate and start at Mount Zion, at Jerusalem, the armies could be so numerous that they are scattered and filling up the whole nation, including to Megiddo, and the blood and the corpses are just throughout the whole nation. Tim?
So when they're talking about the horses being afraid, should we interpret that as there will be literal horses, or are we talking armored cav? Which would be tanks? How do we come to terms with no one uses swords and nobody's packed a bow in centuries? Cavalry went away in World War I.
Right.
Where does this go?
Well, isn't it interesting the state of things right now? As we see the Western civilization over the past 12 months start to crumble, like say with COVID. And if I'm watching this video again in 2 or 3 years, history will judge what I say. But what has happened in the last 4 or 5 months with all of a sudden all the processors and circuitry dying out? Now you can't buy, cars are getting more expensive and harder to produce, and they're cutting out features. And if things continue down this road, it very well could be that they will literally be riding horses at this time. Or maybe there will be tanks and armored cars. I don't know. But, if you asked me 3 years ago, that said, it's probably a metaphor for vehicles. But, they're warning us that vehicles are going to be hard for us to buy here in the next 12 months if they don't get the silicon up and running. So, I don't know. Joey?
I just like to look at it like, you see all the wrath and stuff, and you see it, like all the rivers turning, like all these things happening in the earth, and basically like mankind's being, God's wrath is being poured out, and it's basically stopping everything as far as like economy goes, and famine and all these things happening. Like who knows? Like society as we know it could be like completely crippled at this point, and there's nothing being produced, and everything's, electricity, could be all destroyed.
Now, that's a really good point. One of the bowls here was something about the sun, right? And if we have solar flares, it knocks out all the EMP pulse, right? It knocks out all the electronics. So, they're worried about solar flares knocking out satellites and phone lines. So it very well could be that the sun's going to get so active that it does knock out all the electronics. Yeah. Yes?
So, when it says, and they are coming to fight God.
Yes.
These spirits are literally saying to them, come and fight this false god, because
Yes.
they're going to be claiming that he's a false god. And they know that they're going against someone with power, then it would seem to me that Christ would be there, and that's where the power, or they're seeing that it's coming from him. They have to be seeing it coming from him in order to fight against him for that reason. Do you know what I'm saying? So like, these vials are being poured out, these bowls are being poured out. So the people of the nation have to know that it is coming from Christ.
So I would suspect is that these three spirits,
Yeah.
they go into the kings to deceive them. And they probably are saying something along the lines of, hey, we killed this false god, this Christ, then all this stuff's going to stop.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Secondly, how do they deceive them? How did the spirits deceive the kings?
By miracles.
By miracles.
Right.
Look, we are powerful. And all of us together, with us empowering you, we can finally kill this Jesus guy, and we'll have good stuff.
And that's what I'm saying. So they are knowing that this person, that's they in their mind, in the nation's mind, is the cause
I think so.
of these issues, that he has power too, but he's just a false god. And so they're convinced of that, because you would have to convince people themselves, not just the kings, because the people are going to be doing the fighting. So people are going to want to fight against this so-called false god. They
Yeah.
don't want to fight against
They want this stuff to stop,
Right.
and so they're going to go fight.
Okay. Yeah.
Joey?
I see it just kind of similar. It just points back to the Tower of Babel, like all these people coming together and
Yeah.
just, build this place so that they can overthrow God. And
That's good, yeah.
again.
Tower of Babel, if all mankind is united together, we can do this.
Yeah.
But once again, God says, no. Yeah, good.
And in 1611, their response to the fifth bowl is that they're cursing
They're
God.
cursing
so
God.
they're like already
Yeah.
against him, wanting to
Good.
do him harm.
Good, yeah. All right, Kaden, and then we're going to move on.
If the spirits are from the Antichrist and the false prophet, would that mean that they would survive the trumpets and the bowls?
Yeah?
Okay.
Yep. Okay, verse 17. The seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a great earthquake, such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. The great city was split into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. And every island fled away, and no mountains were to be found. And great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell from heaven on people. And they cursed God for the plague of the hail, because the plague was so severe. So the seventh bowl will include this 12.0 earthquake. I know, I made up a number. And these hailstones. And I'm going to suggest it also includes the actual Battle of Armageddon, which will be described for us in chapter 18. So it's going to be bad, but it's going to be the end of it. And we have other passages about an earthquake leveling all the islands and mountains. It's just to show the harmony of the scriptures. In Micah chapter 4, 1 through 7, Isaiah chapter 2, 2 through 4, Nahum 1, 1 through 15, Zechariah 14:10, and also, again, Revelation 20, verse 9. So that's a lot of passages that talk about an earthquake leveling the earth. Jen?
Is prostitute wrong?
I'm going to put, your answer is in chapter 17, so we'll answer that here in a couple minutes. So the bulls are bad. That's why we don't want to be here.
Summary statement. Bulls are
And but once they're over, that is the end of the wrath. Okay, so let's.
Verse 17, not chapter 17.
Yeah, chapter 17.
She was trying to read along, just wrong chapter.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
You said verse 17, not chapter.
Okay. Yeah, so let's go to chapter 17 because now we need to talk about two things that chapter 17 is going to introduce. So think about this as I'm reading it. Who is the beast, the seven-headed beast? Who or what? And then secondly, who or what is the prostitute, the woman, the harlot? Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, and with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the abyss and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th king, but it belongs to the 7 and goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the land, and the land will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, "The waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes of nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast, until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth." Okay, let's start with the beast. The beast has 7 heads. And also has 10 horns. Now, we talked about who those 10 horns are in Daniel chapter 7. We know that they are 10 kings that come up for a short time to give their authority to an 11th king, or little horn, as Daniel calls him. And that little horn ends up being what we call today the Antichrist. Now, that 11th horn does not appear here in chapter 17, but instead, it is the beast. So it talks about the 10 horns. Instead of giving their authority to the 11th little horn, they give their authority to the beast. Now, what or who is the beast? Of course, there has been many books written about this, so I will share my thoughts on it. And it's not a unique position by any means. It's pretty common. Remember in the Bible when we read about kings or kingdoms, the king and the kingdom are used interchangeably. We saw this in Daniel chapter 2, when Daniel was talking about the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, and he talks about, you, Nebuchadnezzar, are the head of gold. But Nebuchadnezzar was not the only king of Babylon. Rather, Babylon fell later on after Nebuchadnezzar had died and his sons had come up. And so, when we see that this beast is both a king and a kingdom, and now to interpret then the 5 have been. At the time of John's writing this, it says 5 of them have been. And if I understand these as to be the kingdoms who have ruled over Israel throughout biblical history, we would start with Egypt, then we would go to Assyria, then we would go to Babylon, then we would go to Persia, then we would go to Greece. And it also says, one now is Rome, right? And then the 7th one is going to come and stay for a while, stay for a little while. And it would seem to me that, and this is of course where it gets more controversial since it's post-biblical, but the other empire that has ruled over Israel is the Ottoman Empire. And then it says that an 8th beast, or the beast itself, what's the wording? He himself, in verse 11, is an 8th empire, an 8th king. King/kingdom, right? Empire. And so I'm going to suggest that the 7 are now gone and that we await this 8th to appear. The Ottoman Empire ended. There were those years of transition, and then in 1948, I think it was, where Israel became a kingdom of its own. It's now a nation. That's going to end. Israel's going to be conquered. It's going to be for 3.5 years. And so that beast is the beast is both a kingdom and a king in this chapter. Is the way I interpret that. Let me pause and ask for comments and questions just about the beast. Don't go on to the woman yet. Yes, Tim.
So I'm looking at 11, and as for the beast that was and is not, and then it goes down, it will be to come again.
Yeah.
It seems like Rome was, is not, but the Catholic Church is.
And that's a common view.
Rome does sit on 7 mountains. There is no place on earth that is known for 7 mountains other than Rome. I mean, it's the big one.
It has the most written about it. That is agreed. In verse 13, though, the counter argument is that you would hand your power over to an individual versus a kingdom. Would be what the other side would say in verse 13 there.
The same with where you say the king and the kingdom are interchangeable. That is very true. The Pope and the Church, as far as Catholicism, are also equally interchangeable.
The Pope and the Church?
The Pope and the Roman Catholic Church.
Okay.
The Pope is synonymous with the Catholic Church.
I would agree with that.
And the Vatican has its own nation.
And it is its own nation.
Its own 1 square mile nation.
Yeah.
But it's probably the richest nation on earth, and in some ways, it's still a puppet master.
It's also struggling financially today, given its financial hardships and lawsuits have been going on. But that is a very common view. The very common view is that somehow it's either Rome itself, the Roman Empire, or that it is the Catholic Church. So that must be said. Where I thought you might go with it was that the other passage in chapter 13, right? That the beast was going to suffer a mortal wound.
Yes.
The world was amazed and therefore followed the beast. And look, I'm going to just say, I don't think people are going to be amazed if the Egyptian Empire rose again, if the Persian Empire rose again. But if an individual was beheaded or or shot with a machine gun and was dead for 3 days and came back to life, I think that would amaze the world. And so that is more convincing to me. And then I think this passage is referring to that chapter 13 verse. All right, I saw a couple of hands. Yeah, Amy.
Two things. One is the other idea, if the seventh beast empire were the Ottoman Empire, then the ruler would be Islamic, right?
Yeah.
And so that, there's been a lot of links with an Islamic Antichrist.
Yeah, good. So I think it's Joel Richardson wrote a book called The 12th Imam, right? Maybe some of you have read it. He actually came to Reading here several years ago and on tour. We got to meet with him.
Joel C. Rosenberg.
That was Richardson. Rosenberg.
No, I think it's Joel Richardson.
Joel Richardson wrote the Islamic Antichrist.
Yeah. He also wrote it.
Okay.
Two different books.
I don't think there probably are a lot of books on this issue, but anyways, Amy will find out the author. I didn't write it down here in my notes, and I read it probably about 8 years ago now. But anyways, this idea that the Middle East is already united, and we know that this beast empire is going to rule the Middle East. So whether or not, if it is the Roman Empire that resurrects, it would have to curve down and rule that area, I think, in order to fulfill this properly, and not be a European thing that just somehow takes Israel. I think it's going to be an area. Yes, Christina?
Well, I think the Ottoman Empire was Turkey. Wasn't the Ottoman Empire?
The Ottoman Empire was the Middle East, headed up by Turkey.
Right.
Yes.
So I was gonna say if.
Yeah, that one. Joel Rosenberg, that said?
Joel C. Rosenberg.
Okay, so it's Joel Rosenberg.
So Richardson did the Islamic Antichrist.
Okay, so there's been multiple
Very
ones.
close.
Yeah, so they're on the same path. Go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's okay. I forgot what I was saying.
Okay.
Turkey.
Ottoman Empire in Turkey.
No, that wasn't what I was gonna say. I was just saying that because.
Okay, well, if you think about it, raise your hand again.
Ottoman Empire.
So the idea is, at this point, we are guessing. All right, I mean, we're all guessing whether or not there are a lot of authors who think it's going to be somehow the Catholic Church or Rome. There's a lot of authors we just found out who are saying no, it's an Islamic thing, and there are others that say Babylon because it says the mystery is it's going to be Babylon. And they say, well, how's the mystery if it tells you what it is? And they say, well, the mystery is Babylon's dead and gone, and it's going to come back. So there are some who think that.
I got it. It was about the saying it's the Catholic Church, it's this, it's that, it's that. But I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but the Pope and the Imams and all the Buddhist main guys or whatever, these people, they all came together. And they had.
And they all hug and they get along and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this really happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Pope is saying, hey, we all got to get along, and we can, we're all talking about the same God.
No, that's hogwash, right?
So, you know what I'm saying? So wouldn't that, I think that could be something that brings all this, brings this into play.
It could.
Because he's bringing them all together and saying, oh no, it's the same God.
Yeah. Remember in Daniel chapter 11, one thing that we haven't seen this element yet is he's going to bring a new religion. And he's going to conquer by a God of fortresses that his fathers did not know. So there's an element that's still a mystery that we're going to have to wait and see how it plays out. Go ahead, then we can go on.
I was just going to say one more seventh beast empire that I've heard of.
Okay.
Nazi Germany.
Right, Nazi Germany.
Didn't actually
Good.
rule over the land, but the
Persecution of the Jews.
was massive.
Yeah, so that some people think that this seventh empire was the Third Reich. And I don't buy that one just because they didn't control the land. But yeah, that is another view. Okay, now let's talk about the harlot. There is this focus on the sexual morality, and you have this imagery from Jeremiah, I think 51, I think Isaiah talks about it, where you have this cup, right? Now, those of you who have studied the book of Numbers a lot, what do you think of when you think of sexual morality and that you're drinking a cup of wrath? Caden?
Canaan had their cup overflow, which caused God's wrath to come on them.
No,
They
Joe?
have like the ritual where they had the woman try
Yes.
to have to see if she was innocent.
Yes. Yeah, good. So I'm not going to read it. You guys can read it at home if you want. But in Numbers chapter 5, there's a test for adultery. So if you're a husband, you think your wife's been cheating on you, God will tell you. And it seems like magic, where you put some dust in the cup and you put some water and you write some papers and tear it up and put it in the water, and she drinks it. If she dies, she was committing adultery, and she lives, then she wasn't. And so there's this idea of cup of wrath for sexual immorality, and I think it comes from that. So we have this picture being drawn out here, and how is she dressed and arrayed? She thinks she's a queen, and she's wealthy and rich with the world, right? She's wearing scarlet and purple. This cup is gold and has jewels on it. And she's the mother of prostitutes. And so who is this? Where is this, Tim?
Well, when I think of how God views sexual immorality, when he condemns the house of Judah and the house of Israel, is because of sexual immorality, and he equated that to idolatry.
Yeah.
Them fornicating with other false gods.
Exactly. And we've seen idolatry play a lot in Revelation, right? That everyone had to make their own little idols. Remember that was that last week or 2 weeks ago? They had to make their own little idols, and he gave breath to the idols so that they could see and speak and hear, and caused people to die if they didn't get worshipped. And so, exactly, sexual immorality in the scriptures is often an illustration of spiritual idolatry. And so this is imagery here. And who is she prostituting with? In verse 15, she's on the waters, and she's prostituting with all these peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. Essentially, anybody and everybody except the one true God, her husband, right? And so, what's really interesting, let me just ask the question first before I ask that question. Ask this question, then ask the next one. It says that the woman is a city. It's a great city. And so we can think of maybe like Rome or Jerusalem or New York or Tokyo, or pick your great city. And how do we know which one it is? But what's really interesting, I think, telling, is that it says that the peoples hate her, the kings hate her, and they want to destroy her. And why would the kings hate a city? Why would they hate New York? Why would they hate Washington, D.C.? Why would they hate London? Right?
You're being rhetorical, right?
I'm being, well, not necessarily. I mean, anytime I go somewhere, I'm a businessman or a worldly person, I'm thinking I want to suck the power from there, I want to suck the money from there. But there's something different about Jerusalem. Jerusalem bears the name of the living God. And that has always been the city that the nations hate. Secondly, so that's first, and secondly, this city is committing sexual immorality. They're cheating on God. What city in the world is married to God? Right? Metaphorically speaking. Right? Jerusalem represents Israel, who is the bride of Christ, who is the bride of God. Right? And then third, so that's 1, 2, and then third. 1, 2, and third. Is the answer we get in chapter 11, verse 8. We're actually told what city is the great city without any qualms whatsoever. So let's talk about the 2 witnesses. And the 2 witnesses were killed, and their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. And the reason, so once again, we see Jerusalem's called Sodom and Egypt. Why? Because she's into adultery, idolatry, wickedness, anything except what her God wants. Which is what?
Which is very true if you take a look at what's going on over there.
Yeah, and that's always been, yeah.
Because the Pharisee said, we have no king but Caesar.
Yeah, out of their mouths, right? We have no king but Caesar, is what the Pharisees said. Yeah, Joey.
The thing that points out to me is that it says the city reigns over all the kings of the earth.
Yeah.
So, at what point
Certainly not today, is it?
Israel ever done something like this in which all the nations
Right.
are ruled by her.
Right, so Jerusalem has never reigned over the earth. But when we see in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, is this beginning perhaps of the Antichrist taking Jerusalem to be his seat of power, right? When he says he goes to the temple of God, he takes it. This has never happened in all of history, where he sits on the mercy seat as his throne, says, I'm God, worship me. This is now my temple and my seat of power. And now I'm speculating, but I can see how that's going to work out. Was your hand up, Tim?
Well, it's speculation, but who rules the United States? Who ruled the Soviet Union? The same people who ruled our Federal Reserve also controlled the currency system of the Soviet Union and the EU right now. All of the financial systems, there is only one. There may be other kings and countries, but they don't care about that.
And
they rule the world through finance.
And what do we see is going to happen with this king? Is he's going to rule the world through finance by making everyone take his mark. So that it will continue, just as you said. Good. Yes.
Could the prostitution be related to in Judges where Israel turns away from God? Would it be like that? So,
Sure. Prostitution's been happening throughout all of Israel's history.
So what would make this one different than past?
Oh, it's not. This is just the culmination. It's not necessarily different. It's just more and greater and greater. By greater, I mean worser. Can I just say worser? Oh, you shifted to that one. An increaser? It's, yeah. All right, good. All right, any other last questions on this? One other comment is that in Matthew 23, verse 37, I think it's Jesus that says, what prophet did Jerusalem not kill? Right? And in our passage we read, it talks about, in verse 6, and I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And it's Jerusalem that kills the prophets. Yeah. All right, we got a couple minutes left. Oh yeah, I got Tim, good.
So, in thinking about in verse 8, if John wrote this in 90, and we're saying the beast is Jerusalem, Jerusalem was, and in 90 is not, and it
No.
is today.
So that's the beast, it's not the harlot.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Do you guys want to do the timeline real quick again, or
Yeah,
you want to
sure.
save that? Okay. Caden, are you ready?
No, the timeline up here.
All right, so we have Daniel's 70th week, which is the 7 years. Of course, that's from Daniel chapter 9. It's initiated with a covenant, that we see in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. Isaiah 28, verse 15 and verse 18 call it a covenant with death, which incidentally, after the Battle of Armageddon, is going to be annulled. And the covenant is broken halfway through in chapter 9, verse 27, which now gives us our 3.5 year periods of time. And we have it called times, and half a time, 1,260 days, and also 42 months. It's a very set chunk of time. All right, and then halfway through, where it's being broken, we saw that it's broken by the abomination of desolation. That is how the covenant is broken. Daniel 7:25, Daniel 12:7 and 11, Matthew 24:15, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. All right, in that first part, what we saw is Jesus called them the beginning birth pains, and his instructions were, do not be alarmed. In other words, don't do anything. Continue as you are, just know this stuff is coming. And it's false messiahs, wars, famines. And then just prior to the midway point, we have war in heaven. And we see that in Revelation 12, also Daniel 12, verse 1, and 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7. I try to make a case that the one who is the restrainer, the unnamed restrainer in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, is Michael the archangel. And he is called up to heaven to do war and kick Satan and all of his angels out of heaven. And then I I suggested that once all the good angels are in heaven, all the bad angels are on earth, they then possess all those little idols we were talking about, giving them the ability to kill anybody who doesn't worship them. Okay. Also, midway point. The woman from Revelation 12, she flees to the wilderness where God protects her. The two witnesses begin their ministry. The saints are killed. God allows Christians, he removes all their protection, and they are physically able to be killed en masse. And that is just all over the place, but especially Daniel 7:25, Revelation 6, Matthew 24. Also, the great apostasy begins, where the love of many will grow cold. Okay, then we got the seal 6, which I suggested, and I think I showed a good reason to think that's the rapture, with the sun, moon, and stars going dark. Comparing, if we walk that out with Revelation 6 and Matthew 24, they all line up. Okay, then there's also the sealing of the 144,000, and the rapture there in yellow. There are passages, 1 Thessalonians 4:15, Matthew 24:31. And now the new stuff that we've seen yet. The trumpets begin, which is the wrath of God, Revelation 8:9. Then we have the king in Israel. The nations come and attack. Let's see what's coming next. Yeah, the bowls. So we got the extra 75 days after the 3.5 years. And it's the bowls, it's Armageddon. And we haven't talked yet about the sheep and goat judgment and the transition year period. So we'll just stop there. Okay, any last questions or comments before we close for the evening?
Cool.
Yeah, Tim?
So, do the bowls come after Yeshua is on the scene? Because I'm looking at your king in Israel. So is that why that the Antichrist and the false prophet and the beast, they've got the three spirits to say we're going to go and fight God?
Yeah, so obviously this is my conjecture, right? So a lot of what I'm teaching is going to be, what I think, and it clearly could be wrong. But I think Jesus walking into Jerusalem happens at the end of the 70th week. And so the 30 days where the bowls are being poured out is essentially skipping out where he is, right? It's not going to land on him and his people. That remember, they're walking back to Jerusalem, that path that we saw in those passages on the east side of the Dead Sea. But during this time, so in other words, I don't think we talked about this much, but the seventh trumpet blows. It seems to be, it says that he begins to reign. You have taken your authority, you've begun to reign on earth. It says that, yeah. And it seems to be that would be the day of trumpets, Yom Teruah, the day of great shouting, that the king comes into his city. And if you're with us in September, we're going to go over that in more detail. What we do every year on that Moedim, on that Moed. And so now that the king is there, then the others are trying to take it back. So they have essentially 30 days to come and try and take it back, which at the end is the seventh bowl, the Battle of Armageddon. So yeah, that was a long answer to your question. Yeah, Joey.
With your timeline, you have the 144,000 being sealed along with the gathering of the saints.
Yeah.
But you also hold to that when the abomination is set up, is the Jews flee through the mountains into Petra, where they're protected. Is that's where they are sealed. You speculate is the 144,000.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that put the sealing of the 144,000 right with the abomination being set up?
Good question. So the reason why I say no, it's not that way, is because at this point they're fleeing to get to the wilderness where they're protected for 3.5 years. And then if you remember that passage from Ezekiel 20, where it essentially said God meets them in the wilderness, and he says he reasons with them face to face. And he says that some of them, hopefully most of them, accept him. And then the others who don't, he calls rebels. And at this point, then after he's done, I don't know how much, how long this period of time is, but at some point, the rebels are told, he doesn't kill them. They're allowed to live, but they're unable to ever re-enter Israel. And then these others, he then begins to walk back to Israel, and they're sealed. So,
Okay, so then, the second coming, the sun, moon, and stars going dark, falling, turn to blood. He's already on the earth, with the rod over them to rule out the rebels. How do you resolve the continuity between him already being on the earth and that sign happening if he's supposed to come in the clouds at the?
Well, so the coming with the rapture, I'm not entirely, it doesn't say he's there the entire period of time. So we speculate that Pastor Isaiah, that it could be, this is 1 year. And boy, speculating that this could be 1 year. That would leave roughly 2.5 years in there. And I think that would be similar to when he was on earth after the resurrection, after the ascension, not the ascension, but the resurrection, how he came among his disciples, but then he would also disappear. And so there was a coming and a going, right? It wasn't there for the full 40 days.
So could you say that him touching Mount Olives, splitting into perhaps ruling out the rebels isn't really like his true coming? Or like, because if it is, then
Okay.
you would have that sign occurring right at the abomination of desolation.
Right.
It's not.
So the parousia being the coming, which is the word that involves a long period of time. So Caesar was coming to Jerusalem. Well, the parousia would begin when he leaves Rome, and it would be the whole, say, 1 year he was in Jerusalem, and then when he left, that would be the coming. So the coming would be the process of him beginning, and we know this is it because of his answer in Matthew 24. The disciple says, "What is the sign of your coming?"
Right.
And he answers it longly, but ultimately it is the sign of the sun, moon, and stars, which is right here.
So could you say that as he's leading those people back to Jerusalem, and he's in the sky in the clouds, and that's when the sign occurs?
Yeah.
Because
I don't know. I don't think he's actually. Now, I'm speculating, but I don't think he's. It's not a 1 year walk. So I don't think he's going to start walking till closer to the end. Rather, he's just going to continue.
Right. So when would you say the sun, moon, and stars incident occurs? Exactly.
When would I say the sun, moon, stars? What?
Event, the sign of the sun going dark, the moon turning blood, the stars falling. When in your timeline would you put that?
Where's Jesus when that
I'm
happens?
not sure I follow the question.
Where's Yeshua
So
when
the
that
sign of his coming, the sun goes dark, the moon turns to blood, the stars fall, right?
Uh-huh.
That's the sign of his coming. All the kings of the earth, right? The heavens roll back, there's a
Right,
great
right, right.
earthquake.
I think where the crisscross is this. Yes, all that stuff happens in that 3.5 year time period.
Right, so I'm asking.
You're thinking of a coming as a moment, whereas the coming is a multi-year process of coming. It's not an instant coming.
And that's how it was in first century terminology.
Yes.
Parousia was a
If the Pope, as he said, or not the Pope, if the
Caesar
was coming to Jerusalem, his coming was from the day he left
Okay.
Rome until the day he returned to Rome. The entire trip there, the time he spent there and back, was the coming.
Right.
You follow me? So it's not, the coming isn't an instant.
Okay.
The coming is the entire period of time.
Okay, so then how would you interpret the sign? Is it
It's in
duration
that
of
whole
time?
period of time.
So the entire.
How would I interpret the sign?
Like the sign, does it happen in an hour? Does it happen over that entire period of time?
Yes.
The sign is the sun, moon, and stars, and that's quick.
That's
Okay, when is that? Does that happen in the beginning or the end or in the middle, or it's undetermined?
The beginning, the middle of
That's
what?
3.5 years.
The 3.5
You're saying
years?
it's not a single moment. So it's just unknown.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the one passage that might help us with, well, there's two passages. We know one trumpet is 5 months in duration. The other passage in Isaiah 1, it's suggesting it's a year, but it's somewhere in here. I can't do that. Nail it down would be
There's not
irresponsible.
an easy way to
So,
nail it down to that.
Just to
period.
clarify what you're saying, the coming, the parousia, is this process that takes a period of time,
Uh-huh.
but the sun, moon, and stars is an
It's an
instant.
instantaneous sign,
Is
but
a
I'm
moment.
Yes.
just wondering where would you place it?
And it happens sometime between the beginning of the 3.5 years and the end of the 3.5 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say somewhere maybe around a year, but it could be 2 years. But we
You
just,
mean from the end?
from the end, yeah, I'm counting backwards. I mean, it has to be a minimum of 5 months. Probably about a year, but it could be 2.5 years. I mean, I kind of put that in there arbitrarily, because we don't know. We don't know. Right, Bill?
I was going to just comment on when we see this in Jerusalem, they're supposed to flee to Edom.
Yes.
Now, if at some point during that time the Jews come out of Edom and reconquer Jerusalem, and then they rile up the world to go kick those Jews back out of Jerusalem because they've been a problem forever.
Uh-huh.
I thought they don't leave the wilderness, they're protected for 300 years.
Well,
Until they go back and take back over Jerusalem.
when they do, and I think it's going when they enter Jerusalem, I think it's going to be right around the 7th trumpet, which will end this, because of the language at the 7th trumpet about the king has now begun to rule on earth. And he walks in Jerusalem leading the 144,000, the beginning of chapter 14, right? They follow him wherever he goes, it says. And we saw the path over those 4 passages I did a couple weeks ago. Which is just weird that the Bible even gives that information. Now we know it's on the east side of the Dead Sea, and they cross the Arnon River, and then it says that up through Moab, and then they're going to enter through the door of Achor, right? So around Jericho. All right, any other questions? Okay, then let's close in prayer.